Hey guys! I'm so happy y'all came to be on this with me again tonight. So this is our last week of the Build series. So it's been so great kind of pouring into these basics with y'all. So hopefully it's been helpful for you too, and you'll gain something from this. So last week of the Build series. Sorry about that echo there. Kind of pouring into these basics with y'all. So I had my cell phone in the background there to make sure it came on, so you heard that was what was happening. So now that I've got that shut down, tonight we're talking about leadership. And this is such a big, broad topic. As I was trying to think about what to really touch on, I realized I could probably write 10 different, like 30-minute long topics that are totally different on leadership. There's a lot of information. I feel like it could be like a college degree in leadership. So I was really torn on what to talk about tonight, but I've been doing this course over the last 2 or 3 months by Brene Brown that's called Brave Leadership. So I'm just about to finish up the course, so I thought what better to talk about than what I've been learning lately. And so that's what I'm going to talk to y'all about tonight, is how to be a brave and courageous leader. So there are 4 pillars of courage that she talks about in this leadership training. And those pillars are vulnerability, clarity of values, trust, and rising skills. So the first one is vulnerability. And the first week in our Building Belief series, I broke down the Man in the Arena quote. And this is my go-to quote when it comes to vulnerability. And so I won't read it or break it down again for y'all tonight, but I want you to think about this hypothetical man who's in the arena, right? This guy got in the arena, his face is marred with dust and sweat and tears, and he's fighting valiantly for a cause that he believes in. So this is a brave man who decided to do something out of his comfort zone. He got in the arena knowing that there was no guarantee of winning, but he does it anyway because it's worth it to show up. So this man who's in the arena, he is vulnerable. When you decide to tell people you started a network marketing company, that takes vulnerability. When you decide to lead a huge group and you've never held a leadership position before, that takes vulnerability. One lie about vulnerability that most of us have been told our whole lives is vulnerability is weakness. So I want to talk to y'all about a few situations of people who are vulnerable, or talk about a few situations of people who are vulnerable. So think about the friend who has stage 4 cancer and they're battling for their life while they sit down with their spouse and plan what will happen if they don't survive. What about the man who's an addict who admits they have a problem and seeks help to stop their addictions? Or the child who gets on stage in front of a huge crowd to audition for a play? These take major vulnerability. Do you think of any of these 3 scenarios and think of weakness? Can you see any weakness at all in what these people have done? This is not weakness. There's no planet is vulnerability weakness. Now, what I tell you, vulnerability is not, it's not spewing your dirty laundry to anyone that will listen. That's not vulnerability. It's not what it is. Vulnerability is one of the greatest signs of courage you can show, because it's saying, I might not succeed, but it's worth it to show up. It's showing up. Now, I'll tell you, with vulnerability, it comes critics. And like the saying goes, it's not the critic that counts. And so I want you to, if you have a piece of paper and pencil with y'all tonight, I want you to draw a 1-inch by 1-inch square. Now, I got my little Plexus measuring tape here. To give you a visual, I want you to see how big an inch is. That is an inch. An inch is about from my knuckle right there, my top knuckle to the top of my finger. That's it. That's an inch. So draw a 1-inch by 1-inch square. Now inside that square, you get to write all the names of the people whose opinions matter. They don't fit in the square. Their opinions don't matter. Now this was hard, when I was doing this, we came to this on the course, this was hard for me because I am one who am a pleaser, naturally. I'm a people pleaser. And so I let other people's opinions get to me, and that will tear you down so very fast. So I want you to think about on this little square, be very intentional about who you pick to put in the square. And you have to be very intentional about setting these firm boundaries in your life on who you're going to allow to let affect your opinions. So who knows you well? who always thinks the best of you, who's in the arena with you. And they might not be in the same plexus arena, but they're in an arena. You know, they're being brave. These are the people that you want to put on that 1 inch by 1 inch square. So now, as a leader, vulnerability is important for two very major reasons. A, we want our team to follow our lead. If you're leading with fear or pride or lots of armor hiding yourself, your team's going to follow suit. And we don't want a team that's fearful or prideful, right? Like, you want your team to show this vulnerability. So you have to practice it for them to follow you. And two, it builds trust, which is the third topic I'm going to talk about in just a minute. So let's move on to topic 2, or pillar 2. That is the clarity of values. So clarity of values reminds you why you are showing up. And when you're clear on your values, it's almost it's not even a choice to make a decision outside of your values. Like, those are your values. When you know what they are, you're going to be very intentional about how you handle certain situations. You also need to be very clear on your why. So we need your why and your values very solid as you start to lead a team. So why do you truly want to see Plexus work for you? What is that burning desire that keeps you going in this through the hard times? Your values are going to be the exact same in your business and your personal life. So don't try to write 2 sets of values, because you can't be one person in your personal life and another person in your business life, or that's just hypocritical. We don't want to be hypocrites here. You are the same person in both lives, okay? So think about your values. I challenge you to write down what are 3 or 4 values that you live your life by. Now, I don't want this to be 3 or 4 things that sound good or that are necessarily even just great characteristics. What is something that is a non-negotiable for you? It's engraved in you, you don't budge on. And it's going to look very different for every person, and there's no right or wrong answer. So a couple of my values are compassion, friendship, and creativity. Your value might be honesty. And if I'm being completely honest with you, no pun intended, honesty isn't my top value, because I can sit and think of a situation. I can think of situations all the time where it might feel okay for me to stretch the truth to protect a greater value. So that says to me that honesty is not a top value. I'm not saying that I don't think it's a good value and a value that is still important, but it's not my highest value, because I might have compassion as a higher value, and I might be, telling somebody a lie because it's more important to cover that compassion, like the compassion. Does that make sense what I'm saying there? I can't think of a business situation in that instance there. But just remember, because something's good doesn't make it your value. Your values are something, and there's not going to be like 100 values. I know there's 100 things I think are good, but there's only a few things that I value highest. Like, these are our highest values that are non-negotiables. Now, here's the thing. You're going to see people lead differently because of their values, and that's okay. Like, this is good and it's okay. And as your team starts leading too, you need to be able to know, oh, they're doing this because that's their value. That makes sense. I get it. Like, yes. So say your value is justice, and someone on your team does something uncompliant. You're likely going to take swift action and go to them, and if they don't change their action, take it to compliance. I value friendship over justice. So I'm going to probably be very slow to take something to compliance, because I want to make sure that relationship is intact first. Neither one is a better leader. Neither one is right or wrong. It's what the values are. So what does make you a good leader, though, is knowing what your values are ahead of time, so that you're not confusing this with emotions as you lead. Now, it's going to be a deep topic, so I'm not going to go super deep into it tonight. But I want to point out, once you know what your values are, you're going to be more aware to stick to your values. And your team is going to see those values in you, and they're going to respect that in you. And anytime you're consistent with something, you're going to build trust, which is the next big topic that we're talking about tonight. And this is a huge one, guys. So let's talk about trust. Think about a marble jar analogy. Imagine you have an empty marble jar, and every time you do something for someone on your team that helps them feel better about you, they add a marble to their marble jar. And the fuller that marble jar is, the more they trust you. So trust is not something that is built in one action. It is built in small actions over and over and over and over. So say someone on your team comes to you and has a problem with a customer, and you're there to help them and to listen and to empathize. Maybe you call customer service for them because they can't, because they work during the day. Whatever you do to help them, that's going to add a marble to their marble jar of trust. Now, if you don't respond and you already had marbles in your jar, you're probably going to lose a marble out of that jar. So we have to be able to help our team, to earn our team's trust. So trust is earned. It's not something that I just get because I'm a diamond ambassador. It's earned in all of those small moments that I've done for my team. On the flip side, I could lose my team's trust in those same small moments. There are times people send me messages and I don't see them and I don't respond. Or maybe you sent me a friend request and I don't know you're on my team. You might lose a little trust in me for that, and I might be completely unaware of it. So sometimes it might feel like, oh my gosh, how can I ever win when I have too many people on my team? Remember, trust is built and lost in lots of small moments. So one action that you make isn't going to lose trust forever, and nor is one action that you make going to gain trust forever. So trust is built in lots of small moments. Now, there are 7 elements of trust. Let's talk about 7 things that you can do to help build trust in people. So we're going to use the acronym BRAVING. So the first one is B. It's boundaries. You know what the boundaries are. You know what's okay and not okay when you're working with your ambassador. You don't know what the boundaries are. You have the courage to ask. You don't make assumptions. Sorry, I can't even drink. The second one is reliability. It's R. Reliability. You say what you're going to do and you do what you say. The third one is accountability. If something goes wrong, you don't go to blame. You take ownership. Or if it's something else that somebody else did, you have the courage to hold them accountable instead of blaming behind the back. The fourth letter is V. It's a vault. So this is confidentiality. Remember, keeping secrets for that one person is not going to be the thing that builds trust with that person. Because if you're keeping their secret, but you're going to them and you're sharing other people's secrets to them, if you go to your team and complain to an ambassador about somebody else on your team, what do you think that they might think you're doing to them, to the other people? Make sure you are a vault. You don't complain to your team. You don't complain about each other to your team. Make sure you keep those secrets, those things they share, confidential, and you are a vault. I in BRAVING stands for integrity. This is choosing courage over comfort, doing what's right over what's fun, fast, or easy. That can be hard. I mean, there can be something that looks like, oh, if I did this, it would be so much easier and I might promote faster, but it's not really compliant and I could get in trouble for it. But what do you do here? You want to choose integrity. If you're leading a team, it's absolutely important they see you lead with integrity. So practicing your values and not just professing them. The N stands for non-judgment. This might be super easy for some of you and super hard for others, but why do we judge? Like, what is the driving motive behind judgment? It's when we pick someone doing worse than we are doing in the area that we are most susceptible to shame. So think about the area that you are most insecure in, and that tends to be the area you judge other people in, because you look for people who are doing worse than you are to judge. And this is why parenting it's a minefield for judgment, because almost all parents are insecure about if they're doing good or not. So it's real easy to look to side and left and be like, oh my gosh, look at that kid over there. Parents need to get control. Don't look at mine. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on with my throat tonight. So I want you to listen closely to this though, because this is so important. One of the biggest fears I've noticed that people have in the business sometimes is the fear of being judged for asking for help. And I've made this mistake before with maybe showing some judgment to people, because I'll be annoyed because someone doesn't know an answer to something because it's been asked so many times, and I'm like, oh, you should know this already. You can't show that. Like, and in order to not show that, you really have to practice not feeling that, because if you feel it, there's going to be times it's going to show through. So we have to remember, if we judge our ambassadors when they come to us, it's going to shut them down. And when they want to learn, and they might be eager to learn, they're not going to come to you, and they're going to stand still in their tracks. And we want them to keep learning and growing and moving forward. So be very non-judgmental with your team. And the last one is generosity. And I'm not talking generosity here as the type where you're going to get tons of incentives and prizes, and that is super fun. But I'm talking about a mindset of generosity in the assumption of positive intent. You're generous with giving people the benefit of the doubt and believing the best in them. Say someone on your team comes to you with another girl, that comes to you and tells you that another girl signed up someone that you've been working with. Your first reaction might be, oh, I can't believe she did that to you. That's so awful. What a horrible person. But if you think that, you're not giving the other person the benefit of the doubt. You're not assuming positive intent. So being generous toward that person would be being aware that we don't know the full story, while validating the one that came to you's feeling. So, that really stinks for you. Let's find out what's actually happening, because we don't know this was intentional. She may have had no idea. So you want to be generous in your emotions toward people while validating other feelings. So there's going to be lots of times when you think that when something comes to you, and you might jump to conclusions on the worst case scenario. And we're going to talk about this a little more. So that's our trust thread. So once you treat your team with these pillars of trust, and in this manner, it's just going to build more trust and more trust and more trust. And if your team trusts you, your culture is going to thrive, and they are going to be way less likely to leave. So trust is so, so important with your team. And then the last skill here is the rising skills. And this is where that generosity is going to kind of roll down into a little bit. So Brene Brown calls this one the rising skills. I couldn't think of a better word for it. But basically, these are skill sets where you know how to rise above. We know how to rise above conflict and doubt and shame, and how to stay above reproach. So you're going to make mistakes. You are. As your team grows, it's such a learning process. And you're simply never going to be enough for everyone on your team as your team gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Because we're just not. We're human. But you're only one person, and you're going to have tons of expectations. But I want you to be the type of leader where no one can say anything truly valid against you in your character. So our brains, they're hardwired to work in stories. We love to tell stories to ourselves throughout the day on what's actually happening when we don't know what's happening. So when something difficult happens, we go into fight or flight, and the brain needs a story to rationalize what's happening, right? Your brain doesn't like ambiguity. It needs to know who's bad, who's good, who's right, who's wrong, and what are we going to do about it. That tends to be our human nature reaction. So think about an example for this, a real life example. And just even saying that, you might know exactly what I'm talking about. But here's an example. Say you message an ambassador, and you're asking them if they would be interested in doing a team call with you next week, and doing a joint team call because you want to work together with them on something. And you wait a few hours, and it looks like it's been read. You can see the read side. They haven't responded to you. And then a few hours later, you see them posting selfies on Facebook. So you think, I can't. That Tammy, she's so lazy, and she doesn't want to do the work I'm asking her to do, and she doesn't want to do the call, and she can't be honest with me, so she's just going to ignore me and take selfies all day. And even better, I'm probably going to think, aha, I caught her on Facebook. I know that she's ignoring me right now, and so I'll think, well, I'll show her. I'll ignore her right back. So let's say tomorrow we have a big event and I run into Tammy at the event. How am I going to act toward her? Am I going to, now that I've created this story in my head of what's actually happening based on zero facts whatsoever, how am I going to act toward her? I'm probably going to be ticked off. I'm probably going to either avoid her or maybe be like, why didn't you respond to my message? Well, all the while, say Tammy's daughter grabbed her phone and clicked read and deleted the message, and she has no idea it's there. She didn't know I messaged her. But I've created this awful story in my mind, thinking that she just doesn't want to talk to me and is mad at me now or whatever. And I missed out on some major leadership moments here because I created my own story. How many times in life do we do this with our spouse or with our kids or with our friends? I mean, this happens throughout the day. Something happens and we create the story in our mind. That's not the true story. I want you to be very aware of this, and it takes lots of practice, but it's so imperative as you grow a team and become their leader to not create stories without facts. And like we said with the generosity with trust, to assume positive intent. When I see someone not respond to me, I need to assume that even though it says read, maybe they didn't read it, or maybe they got buried and they forgot about it. Maybe they read it and thought they responded and then didn't. I do that a lot. Like I respond in my head and then I actually type it out and then I think I responded and then it gets buried. So it's imperative that we assume this positive intent with our team. So a line I like to say to practice this is whenever I'm starting to like feel all of these emotions and I've created a story, I'll say out loud to myself, the story I'm telling myself right now is, and I'll tell the story out loud. And then once I've laid it out there, I'm going to recognize it. I'm going to break it down. I'm going to say, what is the facts? What is the truth? This isn't truth. This isn't valid. I don't know the facts here. Even if it looks one way, it doesn't mean it is. So make sure we're not leading off false assumptions and false beliefs. So another rising skill is to show empathy to stop shame on your team. Like shame can be a big culprit, especially when we're in network marketing and there's lots of critics coming in. So let's talk about the difference between shame and guilt. These are two very different emotions that might look similar, but one is super healthy and one is super unhealthy. So guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. Guilt actually makes someone want to change, where shame says, I can't change because this is who I am. So we don't want our team to ever fall into the cycle of shame. Examples of shame versus guilt in an ambassador. So say an ambassador says, I'm a horrible recruiter. Is that shame or is that guilt? That's shame because they are defining themselves. I am blank. Let's say another ambassador said, I had a bad month of recruiting. That's guilt. Because they're recognizing an action. One defines you, the other defines your actions. So shame self-talk will kill your team very fast. This is why it's so crucial to talk to your team and hear their feelings and emotions and find out if they're in the cycle of the shame talk. Shame loves secrecy. So a lot of times this self-talk, you won't really know what's going on until you start pouring into them and kind of prying it out of them a little bit. But a little secret to shame is it can't stand empathy. You can kill it real fast with a little bit of empathy. So what is empathy? You know, how does this stop shame? So this is a skill set to listen while staying completely out of judgment. So this isn't the time to correct or give ideas. So if someone says to me, I am a horrible recruiter, I'm not going to help them learn to recruit yet. They're not ready to hear that. If someone says, I had a bad month recruiting, they're ready. Work with them on how to recruit. The one that says, I'm a horrible recruiter, that shows some empathy. So this is the time to sit down with them and to hear what they have to say. And this is the skill set that can be learned. You might think I'm not very empathetic, but you can learn this. So something that you might say to someone when they say, you know, I'm a horrible recruiter, what would you say back? Maybe this is the time to say, so tell me a little more about this feeling. Like what brought this on? And dig deeper, find out, listen to them and let them know they're not alone. Like you're here for them. It's imperative that they know that you're here, and validate the good as they share more and you hear the good, validate that. Empathy can change the can change self-talk from shame into guilt. And that is your goal to do for your team. So I could talk for hours over all of these, but I know it really is kind of a lot of information to absorb. So I'm going to kind of recap here. So brave leadership, it shows vulnerability, it shows a clarity of values, it shows trust and rising skills. So a brave leader is someone who says, I see you, I hear you, I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to ask all the right questions. So you're not going to have all the answers. You just have to have the courage to ask the questions. Leadership, guys, it can seem like a daunting skill set to learn because there's so much there is. But I urge you to start pouring into it, reading books, learning, because it's exciting to learn. And the exciting thing is, leadership's not a skill set that you're born with. No one's born a good leader. No one's a natural leader. Like, that's just a saying that annoys the poo out of me, because you aren't just natural leaders. Like, it is a learned skill set. So you can be an amazing leader if you take the time and effort to do the work it takes to learn all of the skills there is, because there's a lot. So this is just kind of touching on some major things that I value and think are very important. So I hope it's been helpful for y'all. I hope y'all have enjoyed this whole series. It's been great going through it all with you. So y'all have a great night, and I'm excited. Yeah, pipe in on the thread and let me know what some of y'all's values are. I'd love to hear that. Good night.